It was a cold morning at the airport. The sky was gray. People rushed through the terminal, dragging their suitcases, talking on phones and looking for their gates. No one noticed the old man walking slowly, carefully, with a small black bag in his hand. He wore a clean brown suit. It was old but neatly pressed. His shoes were shining, though they had clearly seen many years. His silver hair was combed back. His face was quiet, calm, full of deep lines, lines that told stories, stories no one asked about. He reached the check-in desk and handed over his ticket. The lady at the counter smiled politely. "You're flying first class today, Mr. Harris," she said. He nodded. "Thank you, miss." His voice was gentle, almost soft. He didn't talk much. He didn't smile too big, but he looked everyone in the eye with kindness. As he moved to the boarding gate, a young man in a suit, looking busy and important, approached the counter. He whispered something to the gate staff. They looked confused. Then one of them walked. "Over to Mr. Harris, sir," she said. "There's been a change. I'm sorry, but your seat has been updated. You'll now be flying in economy class." Mr. Harris didn't say anything for a moment. He simply nodded. "It's all right," he said. "I don't mind." The passengers nearby heard the conversation. A few of them looked at each other. "First class to economy? For an old man?" one whispered. "Maybe it was a mistake," another said. No one spoke up. No one asked why. Mr. Harris slowly walked to his new seat in the back of the plane. He struggled a little with his bag, but no one offered to help. A flight attendant watched but said nothing. As he sat down, he pulled out a small photo from his coat pocket. It was old and black and white. In it, a group of young men in military uniforms stood together, smiling, full of life. Mr. Harris looked at the photo for a long time. Just across the aisle, a little girl sat with her mother. The girl stared at the old man. "Mom," she whispered. "I think I know him." "Shh," her mother said. "Don't be rude." The little girl didn't stop staring. The plane filled up. The seats were tight. People pushed bags into overhead bins. A tall man behind Mr. Harris complained loudly. "Can't believe I'm stuck in economy again." Mr. Harris just smiled politely. As the plane prepared to take off, a young flight attendant noticed something. She looked at the passenger list, then at Mr. Harris, then again at the list. Her eyes grew wide. She leaned over and whispered to the senior flight attendant. "Is that really him?" she asked. The senior attendant glanced over. "Even if it is," she said coldly, "he's just another passenger now." The younger one frowned but said nothing. Mr. Harris closed his eyes. As the engines roared and the plane lifted into the sky, he held on to that photo tightly. His hand shook slightly, but his face stayed calm. An hour into the flight, the same. Little girl across the aisle looked again at the photo in his hand. "Is that a war picture?" she asked softly. Mr. Harris opened his eyes. "Yes, it is," he said. "Are you a soldier?" "I used to be," he said with a smile. "Did you win a medal?" Mr. Harris looked out the window. "Yes," he said. "A long time ago." The girl smiled brightly. "I think I saw you in my school book." Her mother gave her a warning look. "Don't bother the man." But Mr. Harris just chuckled softly. "She's not bothering me," he said. The girl reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. She began to draw quickly. Mr. Harris watched quietly as her small hands sketched a simple picture, an old man with a shiny medal around his neck. She ripped the paper from her notebook and gave it to him. "Here, this is for you." Mr. Harris looked at the picture. His hands trembled slightly as he held it. "Thank you, young lady," he said. "This means more to me than you know." He folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside his jacket, next to the photo. Another passenger sitting nearby had been watching, a man in a suit with a laptop open. He was curious now. He searched Mr. Harris's name online. His eyes widened as he read the results. Wait, this can't be real, he whispered to himself. He turned to the man beside him. Do you know who that is? The man shrugged. Just some old guy who got bumped from first class? No, the first man said. That's James Harris. He won the Medal of Honor, one of the few still alive. The other man's eyes opened wide. But why is he in economy? He asked. The first man didn't have an answer. He quietly took a photo of Mr. Harris from the side. Not too close, not too clear. Then he posted it online with a short message. This man sitting quietly in economy class is Medal of Honor recipient James Harris. His first-class seat was taken. No complaints, no demands, just dignity. World, please notice. No one on the plane knew that the post was already spreading fast. Back in his seat, Mr. Harris looked out the window. Below, clouds floated like soft pillows. He didn't care about seats or treatment. His mind was full of memories, of friends lost, of battles won, of silent pain and quiet pride. The young flight attendant walked past him again. This time, she paused. Sir, she said softly, thank you for your service. Mr. Harris looked up and smiled. You're very kind. The senior flight attendant gave her a sharp look, but she ignored it. And still, the little girl kept watching him with wide, admiring eyes. The plane continued its journey through the sky, carrying people from one city to another, businessmen, families, tourists, and one quiet old man whose story had just begun to be remembered. It was the year 1968 during the war. The air was thick with smoke and gunfire. Young soldiers moved through the jungle, afraid, sweating, but brave. One of them was Sergeant James Harris. Back then, he wasn't old. He was strong, sharp, and full of courage. He led his team of soldiers with steady hands and a brave heart. They trusted him. He never left a man behind. One mission changed everything. Their unit was deep in enemy territory. Suddenly, they were attacked. Bullets flew like rain. Explosions shook the ground. Many soldiers were hit. Some were trapped behind fallen trees and rocks. James didn't run. He didn't hide. He crawled through the mud, dragging wounded soldiers to safety. He was hit in the leg, but kept moving. When a grenade landed near his men, he jumped on it with his body. But somehow it didn't explode. The team survived because of him. He spent months in the hospital. Doctors said he might not walk again. But he trained, pushed himself, and walked again, slowly, painfully, but proudly. Later, the president placed a shining medal around his neck. The Medal of Honor, the highest award for bravery in the United States. After the war, many heroes return from war with parades and applause. But James didn't want attention. He didn't want to be called a hero. He returned to a quiet life. He worked in a small repair shop, fixed old watches, and kept to himself. He never told people about the war unless they asked. His wife had passed away years ago. They had no children. He lived alone, with only memories and a small box full of medals and photos. Still, he was always kind to others. He volunteered at the local veterans center, helped young soldiers find jobs, sat with old war friends who had no one else. People in the town knew him as Mr. Harris, the quiet gentleman. Few knew what he had done, and he liked it that way. Back on the plane, James Harris opened his wallet and looked again at the old photo. It showed 6 smiling soldiers standing together. 5 of them were gone now. He closed his eyes. Their names echoed in his heart. Mike, Thompson, Lopez, Randy, and Joe. He whispered, "I haven't forgotten you." The man in the suit, 2 rows ahead, kept glancing back. He had now read more articles about James online. His post was going viral. Hundreds of people were sharing it. Thousands were commenting, "Why is a Medal of Honor hero in economy? This man deserves better. We forget too easily." He showed the post to the man beside him. "This is blowing up." he said. "It's on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere." Another passenger overheard. He looked at the photo on the screen, then at the old man. He felt ashamed. "We should have helped him with his bag," he said softly. More passengers started to whisper, glance, and wonder. But James noticed none of it. His mind was still full of memories, a memory that never left. There was one moment from the war that James never told anyone about. After saving his team, he had gone back into the fire zone one last time. There was a young soldier crying, pinned, under a fallen tree. James lifted the tree with all his strength, pulling the boy out. But just as they reached safety, a shot rang out. The boy died in his arms. James held him for a long time. The boy had whispered one word. "Mom." That word stayed in James's heart forever. "I'm sorry, kid," he whispered now on the plane. "I tried." A tear rolled down his cheek. Kindness finds a way. The young flight attendant, Emma, walked by again. She paused. She could see something in James's eyes, something deep and unspoken. She went to the back of the plane and made a quiet phone call to the head office. "I think we made a mistake," she said. "This man. He's special." The airline staff on the ground began checking the passenger list. They found James's name. Then they found the post online, and within minutes the news reached someone powerful. Meanwhile, a simple man stays. Humble James folded the little girl's drawing again and placed it in his shirt pocket. The girl smiled at him. "You're the bravest person I ever saw," she said. James leaned closer. "The brave ones are the ones who keep smiling, even when the world is unkind," he said gently. "Like you." Her mother looked at him with soft eyes now. She hadn't understood before, but now she saw the strength in his silence. The airplane flew quietly above the clouds. The seatbelt sign was off. Most passengers had settled down. Some were sleeping. Some were watching movies. Others scrolled through their phones. But something was different now. More people were whispering, glancing at the old man in seat 24C, James Harris, the quiet gentleman with the kind eyes. He still didn't know what was happening around him. He didn't know his picture was spreading across the internet. Whispers in the cabin. Emma, the young flight attendant, stood near the back, holding her tablet. She had checked the passenger list again. She knew what she had seen. "James Harris, Medal of Honor," she whispered to her colleague, Mark, another flight attendant. "Mark, I think that man in 24C is someone really important." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Important how?" "He's a war hero," Emma said. "He won the Medal of Honor." Mark shook his head. "That can't be. He's in economy. Important people don't sit there." Emma frowned. "But it's him." "I checked. And I saw the photo online. People are talking about it." Mark looked uncomfortable. "Even if it is him, it's not our fault. We follow orders. If he got downgraded, that's the system's mistake, not ours." "But it's wrong," Emma said. "He was supposed to be in first class." Mark looked away. "Look, don't make a big deal. Just do your job." Emma sighed. She wasn't trying to make a big deal, but her heart told her something wasn't right. How it all happened. 3 hours earlier, at the check-in counter, something, small but important, had gone wrong. A businessman had arrived late. He was a VIP customer, rich, powerful, and demanding. He had complained that he didn't want to sit near the bathroom in first class. He wanted a different seat, a better seat. The gate manager didn't want trouble, so they quietly moved James Harris out of his seat and gave it to the businessman. James never protested. He had nodded politely and walked to economy without a single complaint. No one had questioned it at the time. No one had realized who he was until now. The crew begins. To notice, Emma watched James carefully. He was reading a small book. Now and then, he looked at the photo in his wallet. The little girl from earlier waved at him. He smiled and waved back. A few passengers nearby were now speaking more loudly. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "That man saved lives in the war." "Yeah," another said. "And they made him sit back here? What a shame." Someone pulled out their phone and searched his name. James Harris. Medal of Honor. Vietnam War. The search results confirmed everything. Passengers began to feel uncomfortable. Some looked down, others looked away. One man quietly stood and offered James his seat in business class. James politely refused. "Thank you, young man," he said, "but I'm quite comfortable here." The man returned to his seat, feeling both inspired and ashamed. Emma tries again. Emma walked up to the head flight attendant, Sarah, the one who had said earlier, "Just another passenger." "Sarah, I think we need to do something," Emma said. "That man in 24C, he was downgraded. It wasn't fair. People are talking about it." Sarah gave her a tired look. "Emma, listen," she said. "Do you want to create drama? We have 200 passengers to take care of. The flight is full. What do you want me to do? Kick someone out of first class?" "No," Emma said softly. "I just think we should apologize, or at least show some respect." Sarah shook her head. "Not our problem. You're too emotional." Emma's eyes welled with tears, but she turned away. She wasn't emotional, she was human, and she knew this wasn't just about a seat, it was about honor. Meanwhile, online. The photo of James Harris had now been shared over 1 million times. People across the world were reading his story. Comments poured in. He should have been welcomed with flowers. Heroes don't wear capes. They wear calm faces like his. Shame on the airline. Fix this. Someone had tagged the airline's official page, then someone tagged the president of the airline himself, and within minutes, the message reached his desk. The president responds. His name was Jonathan Brooks, president of Skyworld Airlines. He was a former Air Force pilot himself. When he saw the photo of James Harris and read the story, he stood up from his chair in silence. He made a call. "I want to know what flight he's on," he said. "Already checked, sir," his assistant replied. "Flight 771, landing in 90 minutes. "Good," said Jonathan. "Prepare a proper welcome." He picked up his jacket and headed to the airport. Back on the plane, Emma brought James a cup of tea. "It's on the house, sir," she said kindly. "Thank you," James replied, smiling. She stood there for a moment. Then she said gently, "Mr. Harris, I just want to say I'm sorry for how you were treated." James looked at her, surprised. "You've done nothing wrong," he said. "But someone did," Emma replied, her voice shaking. "And it wasn't fair." James looked into her eyes. "Fairness is a luxury, miss. I've learned to be grateful for kindness, even when it's rare." Emma nodded, tears filling her eyes. A quiet mistake, a loud lesson. The rest of the crew began to change their tone. Some brought James extra snacks. Some offered blankets. Others simply nodded respectfully as they passed him. They had realized something important. You don't need medals or uniforms to show honor. You just need humanity. And James Harris, with his soft smile and quiet strength, was reminding everyone what real dignity looked like. The airplane was quiet now. People spoke in softer voices. Some passengers looked out the windows. Some looked at their phones. But many eyes kept returning to the quiet old man in seat 24C, James Harris, the forgotten war hero the world had just started to remember. And near him, in seat 24A, a little girl sat beside her mother, watching him closely with wide, curious eyes. Her name was Lily. She was just 8 years old. She wore pink shoes and carried a backpack full of crayons and paper. But today, she wasn't thinking about cartoons or snacks. She was thinking about Mr. Harris. A child's curiosity. Lily leaned over and whispered to her mom, "Mom, he's the man from the story." "What story, honey?" her mother asked, half listening. The one from my school book, Lily said. About the soldier who saved people. His name was Mr. Harris, too. Her mom looked at her. You really think it's him? Lily nodded. Yes, and I drew him a picture. She pointed to Mr. Harris's jacket. He kept it in his pocket. Her mother looked over at the old man. She had noticed him earlier, but didn't think much. Now, seeing the way he sat, so calm, so quiet, she saw him differently. There was something powerful in his silence. The drawing, inside his coat pocket, James. Harris had placed the little girl's drawing carefully. It wasn't fancy, just a simple sketch of a smiling man with a medal on his chest. But to James, it felt like the most beautiful gift he'd received in years. No ceremony, no big speech, just a child's pure heart saying, I see you. He gently touched the paper, now as if it were made of gold. A memory. Spark James turned to Lily and asked softly, What made you draw that for me? She smiled shyly. Because you looked kind and strong. James chuckled. Strong? Me? She nodded. Yes. Strong people don't have to be loud. My teacher said that. He smiled again, and for a moment his eyes twinkled. You're a very wise young lady, he said. I like history, Lily continued, and soldiers, and heroes. James looked at her, and something deep stirred in his chest. You know, he said, I once knew a girl like you. The story of another Lily James's voice grew soft. Not many people around him were listening, but Lily leaned in, curious. There was a little girl named Lily, he said. She lived next door to me when I was a young soldier. She was always asking questions, always drawing pictures. Just like me? Lily asked. Exactly like you. James paused. His eyes drifted to the window again. She used to wait for me to come home after training. One day, she gave me a tiny flag she drew herself. He smiled sadly. I kept it in my pocket during the war. Lily's eyes lit up. Did it help? You? James nodded. More than you know. The innocence. That healed for years, James had carried guilt, pain, and memories he never spoke about. Medals and awards couldn't heal what he had seen. But this small child, with her soft voice and honest heart, reminded him that the world still had kindness. Sometimes healing doesn't come from big moments. It comes from small hands offering, paper drawings, from tiny voices saying, thank you, from young eyes that still believe in goodness. Passengers take notice. More passengers had begun to notice the bond between the old man and the little girl. A woman nearby wiped away a tear. Teenager watching from the opposite row put his phone down. He had planned to listen to music, but now he just watched quietly. A father with his young son leaned over and whispered, That's what respect looks like. Even the flight attendant, Emma, noticed. She walked over slowly and knelt down beside James and Lily. Would you like anything, Mr. Harris? She asked kindly. I'm just enjoying the company, he said, nodding toward Lily. Emma smiled. She's special. She is, James agreed. One small act, one big message. Lily opened her backpack again and took out another piece of paper. She began to draw with her crayons. This time she drew the airplane, with a small heart floating above it. Inside the heart she wrote, Heroes deserve to fly high. She handed it to Emma. Can you give this to the pilot? Lily asked. Emma looked at the paper, stunned. Yes, I will. She walked toward the cockpit slowly, holding the drawing like it was something sacred. The message spreads, the pilot read the message. He didn't say a word. He stood up and looked at the paper again. Then, he picked up the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice echoed through the cabin. This is your captain speaking. We have someone very special, flying. The airport was buzzing with its usual noise. People rushed through security. Announcements echoed overhead. Wheels of luggage rolled across the floors. No one noticed the man in the sharp black suit walking quickly toward gate B-17. But this man wasn't a normal passenger. He was Jonathan Brooks, the president of Skyworld Airlines. A man on a mission, Jonathan was tall, calm, and focused. A silver pin shaped like airplane wings shone on his suit. His face looked serious. He wasn't here to smile or shake hands. He was here because of James Harris. He had read the online post. He had seen the photo. He had read the comments. Angry, disappointed, emotional. He had learned that a Medal of Honor hero had been quietly downgraded to economy class. And now, Jonathan wanted to fix it, not with an email, not with a discount coupon, but with his presence. Because some mistakes deserve more than words, memories of his own. As he walked down the corridor, Jonathan remembered his own past. He had once been an Air Force pilot. Years ago, during training, an older man had visited their base to give a talk. That man had walked with a cane. He had quiet eyes and a humble smile. He didn't say much about medals or missions. But he had said one thing that stayed with Jonathan. Forever. Bravery doesn't shout, it remembers, it carries, it forgives. That man was James Harris. Jonathan had never forgotten him. Now, many years later, fate had brought them back together. On the ground, not in the sky. Preparing the welcome, Jonathan arrived at the gate. The airline staff there stood up straight when they saw him. "Mr. Brooks, we didn't expect—" "I'm not here for meetings," Jonathan interrupted. "I'm here for Flight 771. He looked around. "I want a chair, a flag, and someone to play the national anthem. Quietly, no press." The staff stared. "Sir, the flight lands in 15 minutes. "Good," Jonathan said. "We have just enough time to show respect." Back in the sky, meanwhile, inside the plane, James Harris was still seated in 24C. Passengers had stopped watching movies. Some were quietly writing thank-you notes on napkins and pages torn from magazines. Others simply looked at him with soft smiles. The pilot had already made his announcement. James had not said much. He had just nodded kindly, thanking people with his eyes. Next to him, Lily had fallen asleep, holding her crayon drawing in her hands. James covered her gently with his jacket. "Emma." Gets a call in the back of the plane. Emma's phone buzzed. She checked the message and her eyes widened. It was from ground staff. "The airline president is at the gate. He's here for Mr. Harris. Prepare him," Emma gasped. She ran down the aisle to Mark and whispered the news. Mark looked stunned. "The president came?" Emma nodded. "He's waiting. For him." They both turned toward 24C. James was just sitting there, peaceful and calm, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. A gentle tap. Emma walked over to James slowly. "Mr. Harris," she said softly, "we'll be landing soon. But before we do, I wanted to let you know something." James looked up, surprised. "Our airline's president is waiting for you at the gate." James blinked. "For me?" "Yes," Emma said. "He asked to meet you, to say thank you." James was quiet. Then he shook his head with a soft smile. "I'm just a man who did what he had to do." Emma nodded, eyes full. "And that's exactly why he's coming." The plane touches down. The plane landed smoothly. As it rolled toward the gate, silence filled the cabin. Not the awkward kind, but the respectful kind. James looked around at the faces now watching him, not out of pity, not out of duty, but out of something deeper, gratitude. As the plane stopped, the captain made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please remain seated. One of our country's greatest heroes will be exiting first." For the first time in his life, James Harris received a standing ovation. Not from soldiers, not from generals, but from strangers, from people whose hearts had been touched in one short flight. The gate of honor. The plane door opened. James slowly stood, holding on to his cane. His movements were careful but proud. Emma helped him with his bag, but he waved her off gently. I've carried heavier things in my life. He stepped forward, one step, then another, until he reached the gate. And there stood Jonathan Brooks, waiting with his hand out. "Mr. Harris," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Welcome home." James looked at him, puzzled. "Do I know you?" "You once gave a speech to a group of young pilots," Jonathan said. "You changed my life." James smiled. "Then I'm glad I came. No big show, just big respect." Jonathan didn't call the press. He didn't take photos. He simply stood beside. James, as a small flag, was raised near the gate. An airport musician played the national anthem softly on a violin. Passengers from the flight gathered nearby. Some cried, some saluted, some just stood still, not knowing what to do. But knowing this moment mattered. A chair for a hero. Jonathan brought out a chair and asked James to sit. "You were supposed to be in first class," he said. James chuckled. "First class doesn't matter when your soul is at peace." Jonathan looked him in the eye. "But dignity matters. And today we give you that. Not as a passenger, but as a man." James sat down slowly. His cane rested beside him. The world had moved fast, but in this moment everything slowed down. Time stopped for a hero. James Harris sat quietly at gate B-17. He didn't speak much. He didn't smile for the cameras. In fact, there were no cameras, just people, everyday people, airport workers, travelers, airline staff, children, and soldiers gathered silently around him. It was like a wave had spread across the airport. Whisper, a name, a story, and now, a moment. The crowd grows. It started with just a few. A family from the same flight stood nearby, waiting to say thank you. Then came a janitor who removed his cap and held it to his chest, then a pilot walking too. Another gate stopped and turned around. Soon the gate area was full. Hundreds stood quietly. Some held phones, but most kept them in their pockets. They weren't here to record. They were here to remember. A little boy steps forward from the back of the crowd. A little boy in a red t-shirt pushed forward, holding a toy airplane in his hand. His father whispered, "Wait, don't bother the man." But the boy kept walking, eyes wide. He reached James Harris and held out the small plastic plane. James looked at him, surprised. "For me?" he asked gently. The boy nodded. "You're the bravest person I've ever seen." James smiled, took the toy, and held it carefully. "Then I'll keep this safe," he said. "Just like I kept my country safe." The boy stood tall and saluted. James saluted back, his hand shaking slightly, but full of meaning. Veterans joined the moment. From across the terminal, several older men and women arrived. Some wore hats with words like Vietnam veteran, Korean War vet, or U.S. Navy retired. They had heard the story. They had come to stand with one of their own. One of them, a man with silver hair and a limp, walked slowly toward James. He didn't speak. He simply placed a small medal at James's feet. It wasn't shiny. It was old and worn. James looked up, at him. "I never got to thank the men who didn't make it back," the veteran said quietly. "So I'm thanking you. For all of them." James nodded, his voice caught in his throat. Emma and the crew stand nearby. Emma, the flight attendant, stood at the side of the crowd with the rest of the crew. She wiped her eyes as she watched the scene unfold. Mark stood beside her, speechless. "I didn't think it would turn into this," he whispered. Emma smiled softly. "Heroes don't ask for attention, but sometimes The world finally sees them. The whisper. That traveled airport staff whispered down the hallways, "The Medal of Honor hero is here." The one from the flight, he's at gate B-17. And from gates near and far, people walked over. Some came from baggage claim. Some canceled. Coffee orders. Some cried quietly in corners, watching from a distance. They weren't sure what to say, but they wanted to be present. Because deep down, something in all of them knew, we rarely get to see living history walk among us. James looks. Around James looked at the growing crowd. His hands rested on his cane. His jacket was still draped around the little girl's drawing in his pocket. He whispered to Jonathan Brooks, the airline president beside him, "I don't know why they're all here." Jonathan smiled. "Because you gave so much and asked for nothing." James nodded slowly. "I'm just glad I made it home." Jonathan leaned in. "You didn't just make it home, sir. You brought honor with you." A young soldier in uniform. From the edge of the gate, a young woman in army uniform approached. She stood tall and saluted James. He looked up and nodded. She knelt beside him and whispered, "My grandfather always told me stories about you. He said you were the reason he came back." James's eyes filled with tears. "What was his name?" he asked. "Private Leon Carter," she said. James blinked, then smiled slowly. "I remember him. He was only 19, carried a radio on his back." "Yes," she said. "That was him." James took a deep breath. He was brave. "And you," she replied, "gave him hope." One gate. One moment gate. B-17 had become more than a gate. It had become a memorial, a classroom, a circle of strangers, brought together by one man's quiet life of service. No red carpet, no awards, just respect. Real human respect. The final words after. Almost an hour, James slowly stood. The crowd went still. He raised his hand, not to speak loudly, but to offer a small wave. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to come, but I'm grateful you did." He looked around. This means more than any medal. A woman in the crowd shouted softly, "You're a hero, sir." James looked down, then back up, his voice gentle. "I was just a soldier. The real heroes are the ones who never came back." And then, applause. No one planned it. No one said, "Clap now." The crowd at gate B-17 had slowly started to leave. Some shook James's hand before going. Others left notes, hugs, or quiet salutes. But James Harris, the quiet war hero, still sat in his chair, holding something gently in his hand. It was small, old-faded, but powerful. It was his Medal of Honor, not around his neck. The medal didn't hang on his jacket. It didn't shine under a spotlight. It wasn't placed inside a box. It was simply in his coat pocket, folded in a soft cloth close to his heart. That's how James carried it. Always had. And no one, not even the flight crew, had seen it until now. Emma notices the medal. Emma, the flight attendant, was standing nearby. She noticed something in James's hand and gently walked over. "Is that?" she asked softly. James looked at her, then gave a small nod. "Yes, it's the real thing." Emma's eyes widened. "Why didn't you wear it?" James smiled lightly. "Because medals don't make heroes," he said. "Choices do." The memory. Behind the medal, James's mind drifted back to the battlefield. A dusty road, the sound of gunfire, a burning truck. He had pulled 4 men out of the flames that day, one by one, even as bullets flew around him. His hands were burned, his legs were bleeding, but he kept going, because others needed him. He didn't think about awards. He only thought, if I stop now, someone else will die. He never talked about that day much. He never wanted to. But holding the medal now brought it all back. Not for glory, but for truth. Lily wakes. Up just then, the little girl from the flight, Lily, rubbed her eyes and woke up. She saw the crowd. Thinning, she saw James sitting quietly and she ran over. "Did I miss it?" she asked. James smiled. "You were part of it." She looked at his hand. "What's that?" James unfolded the cloth, showing her the medal. "It's a Medal of Honor," he said. Lily tilted her head. "Did you buy it?" James laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. They gave it to me after the war." Lily looked at it carefully. "It's pretty, but you're prettier." James chuckled again. "That's the first time anyone said that to me." A deep question. Lily sat beside him and asked a question only a child could ask. "Do medals make you happy?" James paused. "No," he said. "Not happy, but they remind me of people I loved." "People who didn't come back?" He nodded. "Yes." Lily looked down. "I'm sorry." James gently held her hand. "It's okay. I carry them with me, in here." He touched his chest. "Jonathan returns. Jonathan Brooks, the airline president. Came back with a cup of tea for James." "You doing all right, sir?" James nodded. "Better than I expected." Jonathan noticed the medal. He sat down quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. James looked at him and said, "You know, they wanted to give me a ceremony once, with speeches, cameras, but I said no." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" James looked out the window. "Because the men I fought beside, they didn't come home to cameras." He held up the medal gently. "This belongs to all of them. I just carry it." What the medal really means. To James, the medal was never about rank or fame. It was about sacrifice. It was about the time he carried, his friend through smoke and fire, about the moment he stayed behind so others could escape, about the young soldier who bled in his arms whispering, "Tell my mom I tried." Those moments never faded. He wore the medal in silence, not for applause, but for remembrance. Lily's new drawing Lily took out her crayons again. This time she didn't draw an airplane. She drew a heart with many tiny stars inside it. And in the center, she drew a medal, just like the one in James's hand. Underneath it, she wrote in big, colorful letters, "This medal is for all the hearts that were brave." She handed it to James. He looked at it, his eyes welling up again. "That's the most honest medal I've ever seen," he whispered. The medal finds its place. James folded the drawing carefully and placed it in his coat, right beside the real Medal of Honor. 2 medals, side by side, one from the government, one from a child. Both priceless. The airport was slowly returning to normal. Announcements played again. Flights were boarding. People were rushing. But something had changed at gate B-17. It was no longer just a gate. It had become a place of memory, honor, and heart. And the man who quietly changed it all, James Harris, was walking away with a little girl beside him and a medal in his pocket. An unplanned goodbye. James walked slowly toward the exit. Beside him, Lily skipped along, holding his hand. Behind them, Emma, Mark, and Jonathan Brooks followed. They didn't want to say goodbye, but they knew the moment had come. Jonathan reached out first. "Mr. Harris, thank you for everything, and not just today." James nodded. "You didn't have to come, but I'm glad you did." "We needed to," Jonathan said. "You reminded us of who we are." Mark's salute Mark, the flight attendant, stepped forward. He stood tall and gave a crisp salute. James looked at him, then gave a slow, respectful salute in return. "Thank you for speaking up," James said. "That took courage." Mark smiled. "You gave us the story. I just helped tell it." Emma hugged James tightly. She didn't say anything at first, just held on. When she pulled back, her eyes were full of tears. "I've flown for 10 years, she whispered. "But this was the flight I'll never forget." James smiled softly. "Neither will I." A last look. James turned to look back at Gate B-17 one last time. The crowd was gone. But in the corner, the little drawing Lily had made was taped to the wall, beside a small American flag someone had left. He saw it and smiled. "Good to know something beautiful stayed behind," he said. Then he turned and walked away. A ride to remember outside, Jonathan had arranged a private car for James. Not a limo, not something flashy. Just a clean black car with a kind driver and a soft seat. As James got in, Lily ran up to the window. "You'll come back, right?" James looked at her, surprised. "Maybe," he said. "But even if I don't, you'll remember this?" Lily nodded hard. "I'll tell everyone. I'll draw it in my books. You're my story now." James smiled. "Then I've done my job." At the hotel, that night, James stayed in a quiet hotel nearby. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't tell anyone who he was. But the hotel manager, who had seen the story online, upgraded his room silently and left a note on his bed. It read, "Welcome, sir. No charge. Thank you for your service. Sleep in peace tonight." James read it and sat on the bed slowly. He placed the Medal of Honor on the nightstand. Then beside it, he placed Lily's drawing. He looked at both for a long moment. One was earned through fire. The other, through love. Online waves back at the airport, Emma shared a short post online. Just a few words. "Today I served a real hero. He didn't ask for anything, but he gave us everything." She didn't name him. She didn't tag the airline. But people found the story anyway. It spread like light. Thousands of comments, millions of shares. People who had flown before with James and never knew. People who had family in the military. People who simply cried reading it. One comment read, "I was at that gate. I didn't say anything, but I'll never forget his eyes." Another, "I hope my son grows up to be like James Harris." A simple ending. The next morning, James checked out of the hotel. He refused a second ride. He said he preferred walking. He walked with his cane, slow but steady. He stopped once at a coffee shop. The barista gave him his drink free. "Veterans drink for free here," she said. James smiled. "Then make it a strong one. I've got a long day." Back to a quiet life. James returned to his small home later that day. No signs, no crowds, just birds in the trees and wind in the grass. He stepped inside, took off his shoes, and hung his jacket by the door. The medal was still in his pocket, but he didn't take it out. He already knew what it meant. He sat by the window with a warm cup of tea and looked out, not thinking of war, not thinking of airports, just feeling peaceful. The world keeps talking. Days passed. The story stayed alive, not because of the airline, not because of the media, but because people kept sharing it. Teachers told it in classrooms. Veterans told it in support groups. Parents told it to their kids at bedtime. And always, the same message came through. There was a quiet man on a flight. He had a medal in his pocket and a storm in his past. But he gave us something rare, hope. A flight remembered Flight 771 became a legend, not for where it flew, not for how high, but for who was on board. And every time someone booked a seat near 24C, they would see a small note etched into the metal frame. "This seat once held a hero. Fly with courage.